Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first video we are putting out for Strange Brews. I'm Sean, and this is Josh, and we are
Hey
here to
everybody.
talk about some of our favorite decks, Magic the Gathering in general, and specifically CEDH, and specifically we are focusing on the more fringe side of the CEDH format, our own personal decks, or other people's decks that they've made that maybe aren't the tippy top, most best decks. They're not the Blue Farm, they're not the Tevish Crom, or back in the day, the Timna Thrasios. They're, rip Timna Thrasios. You know,
You can still play TNT.
You can still do it.
There's
But
nothing wrong with Tim Thrasios. That deck still
it's
functions.
it's true. It's true. It's true. We like to make fun of TNT players. But we are here to talk about things that are a little more out of the norm. And today we're going to be talking about Josh's, or was it your deck that you brewed, or a friend of yours brewed and you kind of helped along the way? What was the story of here? How did this come about?
So in my community, my local community, there is a very known local rogue brewer, a good friend of mine named Basil, who has never brought anything conventional to any tournament that he's ever played in except for like elves in Legacy and Modern. But other than that, he has always been a brewer, always kind of wanted to do wacky things. His first real CEDH deck was a Kethis the Hidden Hand deck. And I'm hoping that someday we can actually have him on the cast to talk about that, because that was actually a really cool deck.
That's the three color.
It's the Abzan
from the graveyard to cast.
The Abzan right? Legendary Tribal Commander.
That I remember there was a deck that was floating around for a bit in some formats where you would like make infinite mana with like Mox Amber from the graveyard. This was a Stax deck.
This was a Stax deck.
I want to hear about that deck someday. But this deck today is also another three-color deck that also happens to include black and white, but instead this time red. It's a Mardu deck helmed by Queen Marchesa.
Yes, this was what my friend has brought to the past couple of our CEDH nights. This is my interpretation on, or my iteration on Queen Marchesa, but he's been bringing this Queen Marchesa Stax deck, which has actually taken games from tier 1.5 to tier 1 decks, and I really wanted to brew my own version and talk about it on the cast.
Well, fantastic. So you already mentioned it. It's a Stax deck. Can you give us a little, maybe 30-second quick rundown of what is the general game plan of this deck?
As a Stax deck, your main goal here is to kind of play some disruptive pieces in the form of enchantments that limit what a player can do on their turn. Stuff like Rule of Law and Blood Moon, which locks down your opponent's lands. You want to kind of grind the game as long as you can, because you're making up for lack of combo, etc., by slowing everybody else down. Basically, what you're doing is making them play a little bit more fairly. Magic as Richard Garfield intended it.
Indeed, one land per turn, one spell per turn, none of those fancy lands.
No combos, nothing insane, just good old-fashioned turning stuff sideways magic.
So this is a Stax deck. Are you running any combos in this deck to finish out the game? What is the finisher of this deck? What typically ends the win conditions that you find in this deck?
For the most part, when Basil has been playing it, his win con is actually just turning his bears sideways, his hate bears sideways. But I did, in my version, include kind of a classic throwback combo, which is Kiki Village Bellringer, or Kiki Splinter Twin, or Goblin Sharpshooter in Splinter Twin. Just in case you need to push that combo button, because even as a deck that focuses more on slowing things down and turning stuff sideways, every deck needs to have that button to push just in case.
Yeah, and you are running Stax effects like Suppression Field and Curse Totem that would stop the combo. But as you mentioned before and before the recording, you are okay with this because what you really want to do is
Yes.
slow down the game. But sometimes you can just slow down the game enough, and then you can combo off. Sometimes you want to slow down the game more, and you can just grind out.
Yes.
And
The
that's yeah. So
important
that's
thing to
typically
remember, the important thing to remember here is that that's not, if I'm going for a win, that's not really what I'm mainly going for. I am
that's a
going for
plan
a
B or
combat
C.
win. It's a plan B in case I'm stuck at a table where I need to combo out to end the game quickly.
Gotcha. So, what interests you about this deck? What draws you to it as a fringe, unique kind of deck?
Um, Number one, I am a Stacks boy. I have loved Stacks since I discovered what it was. I've always liked control, and this is Stacks is the kind of the control of CEDH.
Indeed.
Second, I am a big fan of brewing Sans Blue decks because while I have the, I guess not so controversial anymore, opinion that black is actually the most powerful color in our format, I think that brewing with blue kind of not necessarily puts things on easy mode, but you're able to do a lot of the work fairly quickly in terms of your interaction. Whereas removing the what I think is the most highly played color, which is blue, forces you to kind of go outside the box, look for things that you wouldn't normally like. Something like Liliana's Defeat, which was my answer to what is a one mana spell that can deal with the Tevish Zot. In a blue deck, you might just, force it. But since I don't have access to that, I had to kind of find other avenues to deal with that kind of thing. So yeah,
That's an interesting thing that you do have to do sometimes because there's a lot of in these colors. There's a lot of cards that can deal with creatures and also planeswalkers, but the planeswalker ones are often more expensive. Like they have cards
three or
like
more mana usually
three
is
or
what
more
we're looking
mana.
at.
They're
Yeah,
like eliminate, which only kills planeswalkers and
which
creatures
doesn't
with
do
like three or
yeah.
less.
So it'll
And
kill a
Devastator is at
Jessica.
5.
It'll kill a Jessica, but it won't do much else. And then everything
Yeah.
that beyond that. Originally, I was considering something like Murderous Rider because I can tutor for it a little easier, but it's also 3 mana, and turn one Tevish Zots are a thing that happen pretty commonly in our format. So I
Yeah.
wanted a cheap answer.
Would you say this is a pretty like meta dependent card? Like if you have somebody that plays like Devizot a lot, uh,
I try to brew this with an open meta in mind, which our meta has a lot, or the open, just kind of general meta does see a lot of Tevish, or you will see like Timna paired with Crown. So Liliana's Defeat does have its uses. If you find yourself in a meta where you don't really see either of those decks, just swap it out for something like Path. Another cheap, easy answer.
yeah. Or even something like a lightning bolt would also be something that would get into play.
That's yeah,
Uh,
true, definitely.
yeah. So, what is the significance of having Marchesa at the helm there? Because there's plenty of stacks that exist, whether they be a Yasharn deck or with Kenrith at the helm, or your deck with Duretti or my deck with Sisay. What does Marchesa bring that other commanders don't bring?
Well, Marchesa, really the middle line of text on her is the most important, which is when she enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. And as my friend Basil put it, it's essentially starting the game with a 4 mana with an emblem that you have access to at any time that just allows you to draw extra cards, and that is how you're going to be breaking parity on a lot of the more meta decks and slightly faster decks. Is you will have access to just immense amounts of cards in the command zone,
Yeah, you get to
along
draw
with
2 cards a turn.
a really easy way to get that effect back. But in practice, believe it or not, you hold on to the monarchy pretty often. So
Yeah, because as a Stanks deck, you're playing a lot of bears. As you can see, this deck has 20 creatures in it, plus your commander. Most decks don't have that.
And if they
A
are
lot of
running
decks,
creatures, they are like dorks. Nothing that
yeah,
can
they're either
really,
dorks or the commanders generally.
nothing that can beat an alms collector more often than not.
Yeah, that's true. Or even the commander at a 3/3.
A
The
three
scariest
three
one would
Death
generally.
Toucher, 3/3 Death Toucher is a very relevant body at a CEDH table.
Yeah, the scariest one would probably be people with Crom, right? That would be the scariest one of people playing Crom and attacking in. But you can usually get the Monarchy back pretty easily from that.
This is true. Also, with this deck, don't be afraid to turn your Queen Marchesa sideways, because, as I said, just casting her gets you the Monarchy back. So even if you lose it, you have and you can't remove any of the problem creatures, you do have a fairly effective way to get her back pretty quickly.
Wonderful. So what would you say are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this deck?
One of the main strengths is a card that Cobblepot was recently tweeting about, which is one of the I think the most powerful stacks piece in our meta is Rule of Law, and a close second is Deafening Silence. Having white and having access to some of those really, really powerful stacks effects in white is very, very nice. You also have access to the enchantment tutors, which allow you to find those really, really powerful effects. This deck is running 3 copies effectively of Rule of Law because with the way that the format is right now, it not only stops the setup for a win con, it also stops the payoffs for a win con. Considering most decks right now win by paying blue, blue, black and doing a Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation type thing, this just says no.
Yeah, or storming off with like an Underworld Breach, and then
True.
obviously that requires more than one cast of the spell.
Um,
Another
the
stacks effect that I found to be generally very powerful is the Stony Silence type effects, which I see you're running Stony Silence and Null Rod.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
incredibly powerful because most decks rely very heavily on mana rocks. In this deck we run a few mana rocks as well, but those are even if you went like turn 1 land, Soul Ring, play a Null Rod, you're fine. You're fine with
Yeah.
that because
Yep.
that means that everyone else just has to sit around with their rocks doing absolutely nothing, and then you just play your lands, and then you just get there.
Um, as for
They're not prepared for that.
as for weaknesses, you alluded to it earlier. You are running a combo with 2 stacks pieces that directly non-bow with it, but I don't necessarily care about that because, as I said, the combo is kind of a backup plan anyways, and stopping what my opponents are doing is more important to me than trying to combo out as quickly as possible. This is not a race to the finish deck, which is also, I kind of think, one of the weaknesses, since you're not able to, you don't have a combo that just wins the game for a really cheap mana cost like Oracle Consult. But you do have a lot of tools equipped to help you fight that win con and other of the main win cons, like you mentioned, Underworld Breach. We've also, in addition to Rule of Law effects, we're running stuff like Rest in Peace to combat those. And then I think the final weakness of this deck is its Mardu, which is not a terrible color combination for a stacks deck, but you obviously don't have access to some of the more powerful cards in our format. But you do get access to other powerful cards in our format, stuff like Jessica's Will, the Black Tutors. Like you are still able to hold your own fairly well, but you don't have access to stuff like Force of Will, any of the instant speed stack interaction, other than Pyroblast, REB, kind of the implied stuff from being a Sans Blue deck.
So just kind of get to the end of the discussion of this deck. What are some card choices that either unique card choices or card choices that you particularly want to talk about as either cards that you think are really strong in the deck or cards that you think are underrated in general, or just really
Sure.
anything you want to point out or talk about of specific cards.
Sure. The first card, as I mentioned, is Liliana's Defeat. You and I went back and forth on this a lot. I like this in just a general build because I feel like it does do a lot in our format for 1 black mana. It can kill a Gitfrog, it can kill a Tevish Zot as early as turn 1, which is a really powerful effect to have. I also really like Bottomless Pit in this deck because you are able to break parity so easily with your Monarchy that you don't really care about losing an extra card, whereas any card at discarding a card at all for most decks is kind of backbreaking repeatedly, but discarding them at random is even worse. And this just kind of sits there and gets worse and worse and worse for your opponents. And then the last card that I want to kind of bring to light, not because it's underplayed, but just because I think it is a really lesser known but really powerful card in our format, which is Sanctum Prelate. There are so many decks that you can just shut off with a stuck Sanctum Prelate on the right number.
Yeah.
Playing that for 1 or even 2 in our format is really, really strong. That I remember going back through like one of my old Duretti lists and looking at Sanctum Prelate back when the discussion was hot around it, and it shut off. Putting it on 2 shut off almost half of my deck. It is an incredibly powerful Stax piece that you definitely shouldn't pass up if you're brewing up a Stax deck.
Yeah, I know for myself, whenever I make a Stax deck in white, Sanctum Prelate is one of the first cards that I think of, and like, all right, we're putting that in. It goes in there. I think it just belongs in Stax decks, unless you are like specifically really really hurt by it, like in a way that isn't beyond the norm. But generally in Stax decks, as you said, you are perfectly willing to be hurt by your own Stax pieces. It's perfectly okay to be hurt by your own Stax pieces because you want the game to go longer. You want it to be slowed down, and everyone else is
Right.
way more likely to be hurt by it than you.
Right. And then one more card I did want to mention is Leonin Arbiter, which has fallen out of favor lately because of Opposition Agent. For 1 more mana, just stopping all searches. But that 2-mana attacks in the early game when players might be trying to set up, if they're a more fast combo deck that isn't super leaning on Adnaz or can't get off an early Adnaz, 2 mana is astronomical to ask for a lot of the earlier or even like the tighter combo decks. It isn't quite an Opposition Agent, but on turn 1 or turn 2, it does a fairly decent impression of one. So I still wouldn't pass it up necessarily if you're brewing a Stax deck with white in it, but if it's between that and Opposition Agent, like if you have to make a choice for one or the other, definitely take the Opposition Agent, but in my case, I had room for both.
Fantastic. Is there anything else that you want to mention about the deck? Anything else you want to say before we close the chapter on this one?
Just that I know that the sentiment around kind of traditional hard Stax decks lately that I've seen is that they don't really have a place in the format because of how powerful the Adnaz powered decks are getting. And I won't necessarily say I disagree with a lot of that, but as a kind of a more rogue brewer, rogue player in CEDH, don't necessarily take everything you hear at full face value, and don't necessarily take everyone else's opinion just verbatim. As I tweeted out the other day, I would say you have a much better chance of winning a pod with a deck that you love and are really comfortable with piloting and are familiar with than just copy pasting whatever the top list is at the time and trying to jam games with that. So just keep that in mind whenever you're looking for a new deck to build, new deck to brew. And if you're looking for a an interesting new take on stacks. Queen Marchesa is where it's at.
Yeah, I would just say to quickly comment on Stanks. I think that Stacks, I think, definitely has a place. Turbo lists have gotten very, very fast with addition of cards like Jessica's Will and
Jeweled
getting a new
Lotus.
wheel and Jeweled Lotus and getting the turbo out their value commanders. But you still have the power of just, all right, I just I play a land, I play a rock, or I play something, or I play Deafening Silence, and then I play a Stony Silence, and what to do now? You can't turbo anywhere. And there has always been the chases where like turbo decks just like win on like turn one before you even like on your turn zero. You haven't even had a turn yet, and they're just like, we go, and you're in the non-blue deck, and you're like, well, guess I can't interact with them. There's nothing I can do about that, and that happens. That used to happen. That still happens. But I think that there is and always will be, especially as they get more refined, and they have gotten a lot more refined over the as decks get more refined. People like Cobblepot and Callahan doing all kinds of brewing around stacks. I know I brew around stacks. You brew around stacks.
I almost brew exclusively stacks, which is a problem. I recognize that. Most of my lists start with Winter Orb, Trinisphere, Mana Crypt, no matter what the commander is.
So let's start with all of the Rule of Law effects. It's like, all right, Deafening Silence, Rule of Law, Arcana of Emeria, Eidolon of Rhetoric. If we're in blue, we add Arcane Laboratory. It just goes. It's like, all right, now what's the rest of the deck? I don't know. We'll figure it out from here. Yeah, I think Stanks absolutely has a place, and this is one that I probably gonna try out at some point. I'll probably like print up some cards on MTGO and test it out at some point. It seems like a really cool list.
Oh yeah, once I rotate off
Marchesa is
once I rotate off of Urza, I'm jamming this for a little while because brewing this was a ton of fun. It took me back to my old Blood Pod days when I almost exclusively played Blood Pod, and I can't wait to try it out.
Yeah, Marchesa's not a card, not a commander that I've really seen around that much outside of casual tables, and it's really cool to see here, and I think it really fits. It really fits, getting the card draw. Well, so it's kind of thematically, it's like, you are the queen of the table. You dictate the rules of engagement. And I just think it's just really cool. It fits flavor-wise. It fits the deck.
That's something you don't see every day, a flavorful CEDH deck.
I mean, the commander fits the... the commander fits the deck. It's pretty sweet. Anything else before we sign off for now?
I think that's it.
All right. Well,
where can people find you, Sean? Let's do that.
Yeah. People can find me at DeathSingerly on Twitter, and they can find you at 2IntoBlue on Twitter as well. And you can also follow us in the podcast at SBScast. We will hopefully posting there regularly and uploading here at least once a week, talking about various brews, talking about spoilers when they come out for Strixhaven, which should be in about a month and a half. I'm not sure exactly when that's coming out. I'm personally very excited for that.
Oh, I'm super excited.
Yeah, Wizards always get me like, let's go. This is gonna be fun.
Only Witherbloom command was an instant.
Or
but I digress.
An extra -1 or an extra -1 toughness. Imagine. All right. Yeah, hopefully we will see you all next time. We'll be talking about another deck coming very soon. Talking about a deck of my personally, also a Stacks deck. I know, we're Stacksy boys.
Sorry for anyone who's gonna keep listening to us. You're gonna have to deal with a lot of stacks. We won't exclusively do stacks, but that's kind of our wheelhouse.
Absolutely not.
It also facilitates the most stacks because of the way that it affects the game. Facilitates the most weirdness because you're able to slow things down, make it more fair, and then do some interesting things, which we'll see next week, right? With your list.
I think we'll be talking about my Sisay Caller of Nightmares list, which I'm very excited about. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.